Hi everyone! If you are a Muslim person watching this video because you want to learn how to better communicate with atheists, or you want to learn why do atheists not accept Islam, then I really thank you for joining us and I hope that this video helps you out. If you're not Muslim, I hope you find this video interesting and informative as well. Now, like other YouTube atheists, I used to be religious, and I have made a video, as other atheists have, where we talk about this deconversion journey, where we kind of explain it sort of as a bookend, where we started off in our religion, we explain how pious we were, what started us on the path towards this goal over here, or this endpoint, I shouldn't say goal, this endpoint of atheism, and then we talk about atheism. So, what happened once we made that final step of our journey? What changed? If there's any worldview that changed, did you become, did you find it oppressive? Did you find it depressing? Did you find it enlightening? Was this something that hurt your life? Did this help your life? Did you find more friends? Did you lose loved ones because they refused to speak with you after you left your shared religion? And so we tend to focus on these bookends here. And I'd like to make a little series of videos where we talk about my steps out of religion and stop and talk about each step. The reason that I thank Muslims for joining us is that my first step away from Christianity was not towards atheism, it was towards Islam. Now, a lot of Christians, or former Christians that I've met, they also have explored Islam. And I mean, it makes a lot of sense. After all, we're told that we worship the same God, that Muslims acknowledge Jesus Christ. And because it's the more recent revelation, it's supposed to hammer out some of the problems that Christianity ran into. For example, how can there be one God if there's three parts of God with that Trinity theology? Well, Islam doesn't have that problem. And of course, we're told that Islam is a very scientifically based religion, that Islam has a lot of scientific miracles, that phrase scientific miracles in the Quran. So this is something that it sounds really appealing. When we start questioning our religion, we are not seeking atheism. I have to say this right away. And this is something that was so frustrating to me back when I was a Christian, was I felt like there was always a point in my questions, and my questions were to understand God better, to deepen my relationship with Jesus Christ. But there would always be this point where people would say, well, God works in mysterious ways. And if I continued to question this, I was told that I was being possessed by the devil, to question things, that this is a demonic line of reasoning. And so now, not only do I not have my question answered, but I'm also infested with demons. Great. And that, definitely doesn't help. So it's not that we're questioning things because we want to leave. It's that we're questioning because we want answers. That's really all there is to it. So going on to Islam, this was not something that was completely foreign to me. I had served with Muslims while I was in the Marine Corps. I had also made friends with Muslim people while I was in college. So this was not something that I had absolutely no idea about. If I needed a copy of the Quran, I knew where to get it, that kind of thing. So as I was leaving Christianity, my Muslim friends were there to answer my questions, and I really thank them for that. I got to see that Islam was not this monolith where everyone believes the same thing. Kind of like how people think, if they've never been Christian, they have this idea that Christians all believe the same thing. Actually, some Christians don't realize that other sects don't necessarily accept certain things. Some of them, for example, do accept that demonic possession happens. Others do not accept this. Some say it is okay to perform an exorcism yourself. Some say, no, you need church approval. There's belief in speaking in tongues. There's belief that speaking in tongues is not biblical. So there's a lot of different ideas here. And that was the same with Islam. So one of my friends was from a country that is a majority Muslim country. And I'll call this friend A. So for A, they were raised in this country and they had come to the United States on a student visa. And that's where I met A, was on our shared university campus. A had sort of a moderate approach to Islam. A referred to this as the middle path, and that Allah was not here to tell us everything is yes or no, but more for us to kind of understand how to navigate this world. And this is where I got the first bit of information that Muslims believe we are here being tested. So, if you guys aren't aware of this, there is a belief that we existed as souls prior to being born into physical bodies, and that the purpose of being born into a physical body is because we agreed to show Allah that if He wipes our memory, that we can find Him again. So, this idea of even though we're put into a body with no memory of being with Allah, no memory of our previous existence, that we are able to come back to Him. And so, with this idea in mind, my friend had explained that it's not like certain things are always wrong, it's that doing them to excess is wrong. And one of those things is alcohol consumption. And I brought this up because I saw my friend drinking alcohol. And, as nicely as I could ask, I said, I thought this was something that Muslims couldn't do. And that's when my friend had explained it's not that we must abstain, it's that we have to learn how to walk this middle path. And if you can't, if you have like alcoholism, for example, then yeah, sure, abstain from it. And so I did learn there's a lot of leeway to different things. If you're fasting for Ramadan, but you have some kind of medical issue or eating disorder, then you're not supposed to fast for Ramadan because it's worse for you if you did, and that doesn't do anyone any good. That's not a way to show Allah that you care by putting yourself in harm's way. And so I thought, this is a lot more flexible than Christianity. It made a lot more sense to me, I thought. For my other friend, we'll call B, this friend had started off as Christian, born and raised in the United States, and then reverted to Islam. Now, if you guys aren't familiar, to say how someone converts to Islam, they refer to it as reverting, and that goes back to the idea that we were all in Allah's presence before being born into a body. So we're going back to our original state, which is to believe in Allah, to submit to Allah, which is Islam, right? So she reverted to Islam, and she would show up on campus with, a full hijab and abaya. And of course, as somebody who has a Western education, who is a woman, who did the Marine Corps, this is something that I was told was really sexist and oppressive. So I, of course, had asked her, how do you feel about this idea of having to cover yourself? Do you feel like this is sexist or oppressive? And she said absolutely not. First of all, Muslim women do not have to wear the hijab. That's their choice. Of course, where they live definitely depends, because it can be part of the country's law, for example. But in terms of Islam, it's a choice, which again, we can kind of argue, if everybody's pressuring you to wear it, is it really a choice? But that's a discussion for a different day. She also said that, having gender segregated prayer rooms made the most sense, because the way that Muslims pray, their hands are and face, kind of touch towards the ground, which brings the butt up into the air. And she said, the last thing I would ever want while I'm praying is to worry, is some man behind me sexualizing me? So for her, it just made the most sense to have a gender segregated prayer situation. And honestly, that made sense. This idea of, I remember being in church and trying to focus on worshiping God, only to notice sometimes that people would look at you, and it's just, I don't know, you just don't want to think about being a person in society while you're trying to have this one-on-one communication with God, right? That's what your belief is going on, is you're having this one-on-one communication with God. The last thing that you want is to also be worried about, why are people looking at me? So she said that really helped her. And then as somebody who, has gone through some different things that unfortunately some women, and also men, but unfortunately most of the victims are women, have to go through, or are put through, I should phrase it as, She felt that the abaya was freeing, that she could just walk around and people saw her face. That's what they focused on. That they didn't focus on how well she did her hair that day. They didn't judge her based on her physique. A lot of stuff was just covered up. And I thought, wow, that also sounds really nice, you know? I was never the type of person to wear very revealing clothing anyway. Even now, you guys see I'm very covered up. And I've had Muslims tell me, you're already halfway there in terms of dressing the part. I'm a very covered up kind of person. And so this idea of just adding an extra step and covering my hair, um, this didn't seem very off putting. After all, it was my choice to dress more covered up. And I didn't have any religious reason, forcing me to, quote unquote. And I saw some very, very fashionable Muslim students on the campus as well. And I really kind of like the idea of having this additional piece of fabric. You can style it with your clothes. With my hair, it's all the same color, right? But with a hijab, you can have all kinds of patterns and cool colors that even if you try to buy a wig, you're not going to have any, zigzag patterns or something shiny. So I thought it was a really cool way to add to your fashion. It's not just this oppressive piece of fabric. So I was really open to this idea of Islam that I've seen a lot. And so, of course, the next step is to read the Quran. And that's what I did. That is our backstory. So now we're going to be talking about some issues for why I did not revert to Islam, and also some problems with communication between atheists and Muslims in order to try to get on the same page. Now, this is a video I've actually watched before, and I don't tend to do that on my channel. I like to do sort of a fresh reaction because I think that YouTubers that have a ton of background and they do a lot of preparation, that's awesome. I don't tend to have that time. A lot of the YouTubers that I know that create this really excellent content, this is their full-time job and they definitely earn every subscriber and every penny that they make. So for me, it's a little bit more difficult to spend time in preparation. The second reason, though, is that with enough time, sure, I can prepare a really good way to uh, counter an argument or add to an argument. I can look up a lot of information, but that's not something that most people do in the moment, right? When you're having a conversation with somebody, you don't pause, go away for 2 days, do a bunch of research, and then come back to have this discussion. And so that's one of the things I want to do to encourage people to be more open to these discussions, is that the information that you have right now is good enough to start having these discussions about these topics that you're passionate about, even if you don't have a ton of reading or research or educational background here. So I will say this is a video that I was sent, and this says hard atheist questions to Muslims, could they answer? And this is from a channel called Towards Eternity, sorry. And I was sent this video, and the reason that I started off this video here that we're watching with letting people know who this video was specifically made for is because this was not something that I found really helpful. When I also did a video where I was reading through a book that was given to me by a Christian that's supposed to help answer all of my questions, and as an atheist, at the end of the book, I just couldn't really figure out who the target audience was. And so in this case too, this seems like it's not for atheists. It seems like it's for Muslim people about certain faith topics, and then questions that people have. A lot of the questions are basically about theology that appears to be contradictory. And it's sort of that idea, can God microwave a burrito so hot that even he couldn't eat it? And I think that it's William Lane Craig, but please correct me if I'm wrong here, who talks about that God can do anything, this isn't their phrasing, but that God can do anything logically possible. So God can't do a logical contradiction like make a boulder so big he cannot lift it, which of course I feel like, I don't know, shouldn't he be able to? But that's just me. Like, what, I don't know how it would appear. How could God make a burrito so hot that he cannot eat it? That would be pretty impressive, to see a being of infinite wisdom and power do something that contradicts logic. So I don't know why William Lane Craig or whoever it is so insistent on, oh no, God can only follow logic. Okay, well, it seems like logic is the true power of the universe, but I digress. So that's what this is about. And they ask a few different Muslims these questions. I will say these guys, I love these guys. You'll see why. They're so supportive of each other. So we kind of start off the video. They just give him kisses. It's just, they're so supportive. It's just so, I don't know. They seem so pure. They seem like such great guys. So the first question, they're basically being asked, first of all, is it okay to ask you these questions? So they're all saying, yeah, go for it. And there's different people that they ask. And so here's one of the things that Towards Eternity is saying, that some of the questions allegedly make people atheists and deists, which are thought to be complicated. So these questions are so difficult that if you're Muslim and you're presented these questions, you have no choice but to I quit. I'm leaving Islam. I can be a deist or I can be atheist. The end. So again, I don't know why I was sent this video, because this doesn't help me get there. The reason that I'm showing you this video is because I do want to bring up one thing that is difficult when Muslim people are trying to communicate with atheists, or I guess anybody who's not Muslim. So the question here on the screen, if you guys are just listening and not watching, it says, how does sadaqah prolong our life if our time of death is already written in Qadar? If you don't know what sadaqah and Qadar are, then this is not really going to be very helpful. And this is the part that I have a lot of difficulty, especially with people like Zakir Naik and other people that are Muslim that try to communicate and have debates or receive questions and try to do questions and answers from non-Muslims. And the problem is the constant insertion of Arabic. Now, this will be fine if you speak Arabic. This is fine if you don't fully speak Arabic, but you have enough of a background because you're already Muslim. But for people that you're trying to communicate with, they obviously translated this into English, because I don't know where this group is from. I don't know if they're speaking Farsi. I don't know if they're speaking Arabic. I don't know what they're speaking originally, but they're trying to produce it for a wider audience that doesn't speak whatever native language that they're speaking. Why not also translate these words? And the reason is because there is a belief in Islam that these words hold power. So just to let you guys know, this question here, the Qadar is this idea that I would translate it into English as a fixed fate or set in stone fate. So the time of death is the example given here. So let's say that my Qadar says that I'm going to die at age 90, okay? So sadaqah is this idea of prolonging your life, improving your life because of performing certain things like charity acts, and that's supposed to improve your life. And so these guys all answer it very well. And I do agree with one of the interpretations that the sadaqah is not to prolong your life, but to improve your life as if you were receiving more years. So again, if the Qadar says that I'm going to die at 90 years old, I mean, what kind of quality of life do we think a 90-year-old typically has in terms of physical and mental capabilities, right? So if I can improve my sadaqah, if I can improve my quality of life, then even though I'm still dying at 90, it's as if I'm getting extra years of youthful physical and mental ability. And so that's what these guys say. And I agree, it's a very nice way to kind of harmonize the two. But this is what I love. This guy says, bro, we don't give sadaqah so we can live longer to guarantee paradise a bit more. He says, we give this money because people need it. So if we carry the money in our pocket as trustees, if my brother, my friend is a Muslim and he goes to bed hungry, then there's no point in me being here. This is when his buddies are like, yeah. They say, I wouldn't say I'm a Muslim. They give him a kiss. You know, the atheist who donates and gives to the hungry person is more Muslim than they are, because that person gave of their heart. You know, and that's one thing that is an argument about atheism and morality, that atheists do things because we feel it's the right thing to do, not to get some kind of reward. And that's what he's touching on here. So again, you know, they're talking about unchangeable qadar and changeable qadar, which is the sadaqah. But if you're trying to communicate with someone who doesn't have this background, please don't. If you're going to, please provide a translation. And that's one thing that's very frustrating when Muslim people try to communicate. The reason that I bring this up right after I explained that with that background of my friends and my questions, I set out to read the Quran. And I've read it twice. I've read it and listened to it once. I'll link in the details section. There's a really good audible read on it. It's got a really good person who, like, their voice is really good, but there's also a very thorough kind of a forward that I really liked and appreciated. But there's a belief that if you read the Quran fully, by the time you close the end, you know, the last page, you will become Muslim. And it's because they believe these words have power. And this is why it's frustrating, because this is a word that you're using for your benefit, because you believe it has power. For you to try to communicate with me, this word might be totally meaningless. What benefit do I get when you use phrases like qadar and sadaqah instead of fixed fate and life, quality of life improvement? What benefit do I get? And so it's almost like you're talking at me instead of trying to communicate with me. And this is a big problem, not just with Muslims, but also Christians and other religious people, of just talking at the person. We're trying to have a communication, like a discussion here. And that's, you know, that's one thing I try to promote on my channel for sure. So this, again, it's an interesting video. It'll be linked in the details section. But at the end of this, and again, they answer it very well. I thought their answers were really good. At the end of this, I thought, okay, why did they send this to me? This didn't answer any of my questions as an atheist. And to bring this video back up to share it with you guys right now, I also found some other videos, and those are the ones I do want to have like a reaction type of response to. So let's go ahead and check those out. All right, so we're just going to start with the first one here, which is also from the YouTube channel Towards Eternity. And the title is Hard Atheism Questions to Muslim Historian. Can he answer in 100 seconds? Which is perfect for us, right? Can he answer in 100 seconds? Cool. So we're not going to be listening to it just because we don't want to trip the YouTube censor, or the copyright censor. So these are just questions for a historian. I don't know. Let's check it. So why did God allow other religions to be corrupted? Okay, well that's interesting. So why did God allow this? How do you know the Quran has not changed? So let's see what's okay. We don't need the closed captioning here. All right. So there was never more than one religion. Never. That's why the Quran spoke to the Christians directly. Gotcha. Cool. So what is the need for religions and prophets? What's the other question? Can't we understand it on our own? Could you leave a child in the middle of the road and ask him to find his home? Or if you leave a man in the middle of the desert, somewhere in a huge desert, can that person find his own way without any compass in his hand? No. So to find a way, you have to have direction. I think I know where he's going with this. It's this idea that you need the Quran explained to you. You need Allah's will explained to you because you can't figure it out on your own. You're a child in understanding. But isn't the whole point that we should all recognize Allah? It's sort of like, to use the being lost in the desert example. Okay, maybe I don't know how to find my way out of this situation because I've never been here before, But if I take out my phone and try to find some kind of direction based on, GPS and my location, I should be able to navigate out of this because I'm able to communicate with something outside of myself that's on the outside looking in, showing me the way. Isn't that the whole idea? Is to communicate that Allah is trying to share with us? Can the purpose of life be found without having a prophet? Why did God allow other religions to be corrupted? This one, it says, is the most played, so we'll go to this section. Just what do we have here? Could a single version, oh, come from the beginning? So I guess this is of the Quran. There was never more than one religion, etc. How do you know the Quran has not changed? Now, the reason I'm going through these and not answering them is because none of these are my question as an atheist, ever. So I don't know why this person is saying hard atheism questions to a Muslim historian. I feel like if I was a Muslim wrestling with Islam, these are questions that I would ask. This is not an atheist question. So let's kind of go back and check out this one with Ali Dawah. If you watch Apostate Prophet, you'll know Ali Dawah is a little bit infamous on his channel. All right, so who created God? Okay, let's see. Tough atheism questions. You believe in God, so scientists couldn't figure that out, but you could. Is that right? Okay, so that's the intro. All right. So it says Google. Here we go. Ali Dawah, we have a minute for each question. You ready? And he says, sure, I'm assuming. Can you prove God's existence in 1 minute? Girl, I ain't asking this. Who's asking this? What is this, like the toughest atheism questions? I have never approached a Muslim person and said, prove in a minute. You got a minute. I would never do that. But Ali Dawah seems to be prepared. So let's see what he has to say. Let's look at Google. In order for Google to exist, we need the internet. In order for the internet to exist, we need the computer. Are we doing the, oh, please don't tell me we're doing the first cause argument. In order for the computer to exist, blah, 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 human beings created infinite regress. There it was. I saw that before we skipped over. So we need something which is independent, self-sufficient, necessary being. This sounds like William Lake Dawah is what it sounds like, which is God. Okay, so why can't the necessary being be the universe? Okay, it's good that you say that. It shows that you acknowledge that we require a necessary being, so you agree with me. That's good. Okay, so we say that contradicts the necessary being because this is independent, self-sufficient, and it's necessary. Okay, well, why does it have to be like independent, self-sufficient, necessary? And a lot of times, some apologists, in Christianity too, they'll also add in that it's a personal God for some reason. So when we're talking about this independent, necessary, self-sufficient thing, I don't know if it necessarily must be self-sufficient. So for example, if I create, I'm trying to think of any example here. If I create a computer program, let's say that I created Google, I could die later, right? So I'm not independent of Google and still creating a bunch of Googles and that I'm able to do that for all eternity. I'm not communicating with anyone, right? I'm just making Google and that's it. And so this is the thing that I find a bit lacking with this argument, that if we can agree that something necessary and independent and self-sufficient in whatever way sparked the universe, why do we also have to assume it's still around, it hasn't expired, that there wasn't some kind of collision and in creating the universe those things have died? For example, just to use, I guess, a crude example, when bees reproduce, the drone, the male dies, right? So, how come that couldn't be part of it? Why couldn't it be something like atoms? If we know that matter can't be created or destroyed, then how come this matter is what couldn't have always existed? Why must it be a being that's outside of space and time, but also inside of our space and time, that can communicate with us, that wants the best for us, that's provided an afterlife for us? And so this is a good close question, I would say. That's pretty common for atheists, but I don't know if he's answering it in a way that would satisfy me, because that would be my follow-up question. Let's see. Who create? Oh, can God create a rock that he can't lift? Oh, I didn't. I swear I didn't watch this in advance. Let's see what he says. Let's see if he does the. Oh, it has to be logical. All right. So, can I ask the question? Can God cease to exist? Of course not. It's contradictory. Okay. So, that's like me saying how many days in a week? Yes or no? Okay. But again, I don't know. An all-powerful thing. Right, isn't it the idea that it's outside of our universe? So maybe inside of our universe, this doesn't make sense, but outside of the universe, who knows, you know? So, yeah, who knows? Can there be more than one creator? No, because we go back to the argument of necessary being. Well, again, if we want to use the Google example, it's not just one person that created it, but if you want to use my bee example, both of them were necessary beings. And part of Gnosticism and stuff is this idea that there's um, multiple creators. There's like Sophia, there's Barbello, those types of like divine mothers that create the aeons. Um, so I don't know why we can't have two creators. Why can't they're like they can exist alone, but when they come together, they can create. You know what I mean? Um, you know, it's like I can't hammer something, I can't adhere something with a nail without a hammer, and I can't adhere something with a nail if I only have a hammer, right? If I want to put a board on the wall, I need the nail and I need the hammer. Either of them by themselves can be self-sufficient and exist, and that's fine, but only combined do they do the work that I would like. So I don't understand why we can't have that. Let's see if he answers that. If there's more than one creator, then the question is, how could you have one necessary being, which is self-sufficient, independent? If there's another creator, then it's dependent. No. You were the one that decided it must be one creator. And again, we use creator. This is a word that we tend to assign to a being, right? A thinking agent. Why couldn't the creation be from, I don't know, something that over time became unstable and spilled its matter guts out all over, and that was the Big Bang, right? Why couldn't it be something like this? I feel like, again, as some atheists will say, that this idea of, oh, well, God did it, this is such a, it kind of puts an end to our searching to give us an answer that may not be the correct answer. So, yeah, I don't see why. What do you mean it's not necessary? So the question is, if there's two creators, firstly, Allah says in the Quran that they would fight each other for power. We can't really use the Quran as a reason, right, or an answer when we're talking to atheists. And the reason for that is because we do not agree with the basic premise of the Quran, that it is inspired by, that it is message from Allah through Jibril to Muhammad, who narrated it multiple times, and it was written down. We don't accept that authorship, right? We don't accept that source of authorship. So to say, well, in the Quran, you know, it has to be one because the Quran says blah, 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 you have to first, and I say this in the most polite way, the most benign way, you have to first give me a reason to care about what the Quran says. And this is where I had trouble going into Islam. When I was reading the Quran, I was left with pretty much the same problem that I had with the end of when I finished reading my Bible. So what? I mean, that's what it says, but does any of this have any like outside information to support it? right? Is there any corroborating evidence for this? Anybody could write something down and say it came from a deity. Does that mean it did? And once you have that thought in your head, going to any other religious text, it just you're stuck with that same idea. So let's see if they'll get to that. Let's see. All right, sufficient, it's got to be that. All right, so who created God? Well, you can't ask this question after Ali Dawah says it's a necessary, sufficient, self-sufficient being, because obviously that's the answer he's going to give, right? Let's just see if he says that. Yeah, okay, cause and effect. So I find that's a bad question to insert. If I was like going down a list of questions that atheists had proposed to me, and I was like, oh, this one says, so who created God? Oh, you know what, Ali Dawah, you already answered that. So let's skip it. Why Islam when there's many other religions? Okay, I mean, that's a good question, right? When I'm communicating, and I just had responded to a Muslim person today. We're having a discussion in the YouTube comment section, and the question, I had asked for evidence, and they brought up, the classic look at the trees argument, and I mentioned, well, I understand that you see it as evidence, but the reason that I can't accept it as evidence is you cannot tell me Allah has created this thing without demonstrating Allah is real and that Allah can create. Because I can just point to pretty much any other creator deity in history and say, well, look at those trees, those same trees. That obviously proves that Marduk is the creator, right? That validates the ancient Babylonian belief system, and we can't do that, right? So why should I believe that the Quran got it right, that Islam got it right? So let's see how he answers. So it says, I asked myself before I came to Islam, why Islam? And when I did my research and what I was going to with the fitra, see, there's the thing. There's again, there's that example of I'm just going to just use a word that Muslims understand. But, if we're trying to have this communication in English and you don't have this background, too bad, right? So he says, there was a study done in Oxford University by Justin Barrett. He found that young kids who are not taught about Islam or Christianity or any other religion, they all have an inclination to believe in one God. Not two, not three. So me, I had that in myself to believe in one God. Now, I will say at the end of this video, I'm going to add on, I'm going to read through that study and just give you my thoughts on it. Because I am working on a master's in psychology, so maybe that'll help. So he has this idea to believe in one God. Okay, fine. So you have a natural feeling to believe in one God. Okay. I mean, I knew a kid that liked to eat nickels, just eat coins, but just the feeling that we have, right? And then that is interesting. Where do you find these kids that were never taught about any deities? So I am interested, where did they get these kids from? So, okay, he's believing in one God, but now the question is, why Islam? I asked the same question to myself. I looked at it, I realized true monotheism in its true sense. If you go to the Christians, they say we're monotheists, they believe in three in one. That's what I just said earlier. So they say we believe in a bunch of gods as one. So the point of pure monotheism is to worship God, blah, blah, blah. So it's only in Islam. Okay. Is it? Is it only in Islam? I mean, we've had other attempts, like Atheism with, what's his name? Pharaoh Akhenaten, for example, just one idea. But why any religion? I hope he answers that, because why not just be a deist? Why any religion? Why do you believe that any religion got it right? So in the Quran, it says that it's the only scripture on this planet being preserved and has miracles that we can see. Oh, please discuss any. Okay, if I go to a Christian, I say, look, I want to believe in Christianity. Show me Jesus gave life to the dead. And they say, go to the Jews, do what Moses did, show me, no. So if they come to us, what's the miracle of the Quran? It says here, I can show you, touch it, you can feel it, you can analyze it. So he's saying that if you ask a Christian to prove that Jesus could raise somebody from the dead, they can't do it. If you ask them to prove or Jewish people to prove stuff from Moses, they can't do it. But if you ask for proof, they can give you a Quran and you can touch it and analyze it. The Quran, again, is not the proof because we are not starting with the same belief that there is a God who can author this stuff. Now, for Ali Dawah, he has this idea that he really wants to believe in a single God. Cool, not everybody has that feeling. So for those of us that don't have that feeling, where do we go from there, right? And I'm not saying this as a criticism of Ali Dawah, but again, the point of this video is to really have Muslim people understand what the atheist perspective is. So if you give me a Quran, I'm going to look at it, read it, and say, cool, but where's the basis for any of this? Like, why, after I'm finished reading this, what's supposed to make me believe in it, right? And so again, here's that thing I had mentioned, that there's a belief that if you read the Quran, you will believe in it. Just you will be so compelled and convinced that you'll believe in it here, right? So the Quran is for all mankind. You can see it, hear it, examine it. But the miracles that the other prophets done, you can never prove that. That's why it was for that time specifically. Well, wait a minute. And the Quran is for all times because we have a method of oral tradition, which is the Quran, and many generations after us can examine. Wait. But that is every, so he's saying that he can't demonstrate the miracles of the prophets, but at least you can read the book because it's from an oral tradition. But isn't that everything? That's the same argument. You can, does he knows that that applies to Judaism and Christianity too, right? I examined it, I read it, I looked at the miracles. Now notice, by the way, they're still letting him talk. So his time ran out and he's still going, right? So he's just saying, you know, why I didn't, all right, so what are the miracles? You told us that there's miracles in the Quran. Can you please tell us just one miracle of the Quran? Okay. Which one is it going to be? It's going to be either the Big Bang and then the Big Crunch, which we don't think is necessarily going to happen again because there's now an idea of the heat death and like permanent expansion of the universe. Or it's going to be that everything is made of water, that every living thing is like water. Okay. I'm going to be generous. I'll give you 3. Okay, maybe we'll get the 2. What do we got? You got to be generous in life. All right, well, let's see. The first is very profound and very important. We're told, for example, that we're talking, let's see, very interesting, because Abu Lahab could make one statement and the whole of Islam will fall on the ground. Allah says in the Quran, Abu Lahab and his wife, if they're going to hell, they're going to be disbelievers. All right, so Abu Lahab had to do one thing and disprove Islam, because the Quran clears you're going to hell and you and your wife are going to die as a disbeliever. So this is the thing. Abu Lahab could have said, hold on a second. Oh, okay. Wait. This is a really unconvincing thing for him to say. So he died as a disbeliever. To me, that is profound because he had to do one statement to disprove the whole thing. He wanted to stop Muhammad. They had to just 10 seconds. Again, the shahada, right? We're just, why don't you translate that for those of us that maybe don't know that, right? So that's it. There's a guy. And again, if you haven't read the Quran or if you don't remember this part of the Quran, right? So there's a guy that we'll just call him Abu, And so Abu, he says he could make one statement and Islam will fall on the ground. Basically, that if Abu says this thing, then Islam will crumble. And he didn't say the thing, therefore, Islam. Now, who is Abu and why should I care? Right? That's kind of where I'm coming from here. Why should I care what he said? And how do we know he didn't say it? Maybe he did say it, but that doesn't make for a very good story. You know, if I'm telling you this story, um, maybe he'd said it and nobody heard him because everyone was cheering on this idea, like, yeah, you go, you tell him. And he's trying to yell it to the crowd. I do say the thing, I do say it, but most of the crowd couldn't hear him, for example. So this is, to me, this is not a miracle whatsoever. Number one. Number two, he says that we can do this in our own life. So maybe he's trying to imply that Allah held his tongue or something, right? So if he says, if Abu says that your religion is false because your religion says that I'm going to hellfire, your religion says I'm going to die as a disbeliever, and I accept Islam, he didn't do it. He died as a disbeliever. I don't understand the point of this. I don't. How is that a miracle? That one guy didn't say a thing. I don't. I don't see the point he's trying to make. If anybody can explain this, please do. Okay. All right. So, number two, evidence, for example, when we're talking about the Quran, the time of Moses, time of Yusuf, then Allah talks at the time of Yusuf, alayhi salam. Okay, I think it's peace be upon him. He calls the ruler a king. At the time of Moses, he calls him a pharaoh. But in the Bible, they call the time of Yusuf and they call him a pharaoh. But the time of Moses, they call him a pharaoh. And this is a historical error because when they deciphered the Rosetta Stone, they found that there were no pharaohs at the time of Joseph. The dynasty didn't exist. Now, I don't want to look this up. I just kind of want to come to it, but just based on my background, like the fact that I teach history, I'm trying to think when Moses was alleged to exist. I think this is one of those things that we're gonna have to look up. When did Moses exist? The 14th century BCE, they had the dynasties then. What is he talking about? What is he talking about? What do you mean they didn't have the pharaohs? There were kings? How did the Quran know this? I mean, that's what a king... I mean, does he understand that, again, when we're talking about like the Bible and translating it into English and stuff, that we read this as Pharaoh, but they're talking basically about the kings of Egypt. It's like if I use the word czar, I'm not saying there's a czar and there's a king. It's like I'm using the Russian word to describe a Russian leader, right? It's not that I'm trying to claim these are two totally separate concepts. So wow. I don't, I mean, this, to him, this is like a miracle. And I'm trying to put myself in his position where he really, I mean, couldn't he just look up when Moses was, I mean, I don't want to insult the guy. Like, I'm not trying to be condescending. It's just how is this supposed to convince me that the Quran used a different word for leader? I don't know, maybe part of the oral traditions, maybe that's how they do it. They say the Quran copies the Bible. Why didn't they copy the mistake? How did they know at the time of Joseph the ruler is a king? There's not pharaohs. Has anybody told him that Has anybody told him that when we use pharaoh, we're just using it generally to say like a leader such as a king in ancient Egypt? I mean, they're not saying like now if it was something like a specific pharaoh's name or a specific dynasty of pharaohs, that's fine. Um Plus, is he trying to say that like the original authors in the Torah got it wrong, but wouldn't they have been around the same time? Does he think that Judaism didn't exist at the time of Moses? I'm very confused what his point is, especially that he believes it's a miracle. Okay, that's number two. Number three, so it says that the Romans have been defeated. The historians say the way that Romans got defeated was by the Persians. I mean, Rome had multiple, issues, and I mean, this is not. I mean, what's let's excuse me. What's he gonna say here? Because I mean, Rome, slowly fell. Right? It was not just by the Persians, but it was by like the Goths. It was different groups that fought against the Rome. I mean, let's find out what he says before we get into it. It's impossible to think, let alone them coming back to win, for them to even exist. Wait, the Romans have been defeated, but they're going to win? That's a big statement. Like me saying, you guys together, we're going to take over the United States and we're going to go beat Trump. It's crazy. It's a big gamble. It's a big gamble. No, it's not. Is he saying that the Persians were like three dudes trying to kill a world leader? No. Oh my goodness. What do you mean it's a big gamble? After 3 to 7 years or 3 to 9 years, the Romans come and defeat the Persians. These are historical. These are the same. They're hundreds. Okay, but I don't see these as miracles. How I So hopefully, again, if you are Muslim and watching this, you can see why these don't really, they're not convincing, right? So to have this big empire versus another big empire, and to say, oh yeah, they're going to fight and one empire is going to win, that's not a gamble. It's just not. I don't know how, again, it's not equivalent to saying two or three of us are going to go and launch some kind of assassination attempt on a world leader. This, where it's three people that are at a severe disadvantage in terms of firepower, financing, etc. Right? Um, I don't. I'm just gonna move on because I don't. Yeah. It says you believe in God, so scientists couldn't figure that out, but you could. Is that right? Now, this is not an argument that I've ever heard an atheist make. I've heard atheists say something like, so you claim to know, like, you're calling me an atheist arrogant, but you're the one that claims to know how the universe started and that you have some kind of direct line of communication with the creator of the universe. And I'm saying I don't know which one of us has a more arrogant position, which one of us has a more honest position. But I've never heard an atheist say, Oh, so science can't find God, but you found God? How did that happen? Like, that's nothing I've ever heard. This sounds again like it's not a real atheist question. So it's not about could we use our logic. The science deals with the five senses, what you can see, empiricism. I don't know about what you can see. I would say what you can demonstrate, maybe. Yeah. And that's again that's a very my cat is very fresh. I'm sorry, Crook. I have to give him water. I'll be back. He's okay. Crook demands water that is presented to him in like a trickling form from the sink. So anyway, this is not something atheists say. It's just not. This is something that I've heard Muslims and Christians misrepresent about atheists. That, oh, they don't believe it because they can't see it. They're so rigid in their thought. They're so science and, oh, it's the five senses, etc. Right? Um, that's not how it works. It's more like you're making a claim about something that should be testable, and it's not, or you're making a claim that is untestable. So I'll give you an example of a testable claim, something like if you do A, B, and C things in order to please God, then you will receive some kind of benefit from that. Or if you pray a lot, then you will receive an answer to your prayers. Like you'll be healed of a sickness, for example. So those are things that we should be able to test. If I do these things or if I pray, and this can even be like a personal test. And this is where some religious people tell us as atheists, well, just take a chance or take a leap of faith, pray sincerely, read the Quran sincerely, and you will have Allah speaking directly to your heart. And so even when we test that, where that's not something we can physically see, it's not something we can demonstrate to other people, it's like a deep and personal and hidden experience, even that doesn't provide any results. And then there's these untestable claims, such as God made humans without first showing God, which that is something that you believe you cannot do. You cannot, ask God to come down and present himself, right, and answer your questions. So this would be an example of something you cannot test. You're just making a statement saying this is the case, the end. We can also talk about this idea of like a first cause, where perhaps Allah is not the first cause. Maybe he's our first cause, but he's not the first cause. So perhaps something else that is a different God, a bigger God, a more powerful God created Allah. But Allah was embarrassed or just selfish or whatever, and has decided to only communicate to us, no, I am the top God, I'm the only God. And how would we ever test it? How would we ever go outside the universe and communicate with these other deities, right? Especially if this is his personal project, we're hidden in a box somewhere under his bed, nobody knows about us, and how would we prove that? We can't. So this is the problem, is that when religious people, especially from Islam or Christianity, when they're making these really solid claims, these are things that either we should be able to test, and we have, and they don't produce the results you claim, or these are things that we cannot test, therefore we ask, well then, if you don't know, why do you believe it's true? So in the case of the untestable option, that Allah is the only first cause, he is the self-sufficient one, there's no other gods outside of him, how can we possibly know that? How? And if you don't know how you can possibly know that, why do you believe it? And you may say, well, it's something I take on faith. But why take it on faith? That's my big question. Why are you accepting this as a fact when you fully admit there is no way I can test it? And let's see if he does bring that up. Accidentally stopped the recording. Sorry about that. So let's see if he does bring that up. Let's find out. You know, it's not something science doesn't talk about the supernatural, it stops the physical. But we know, for example, scientists have discovered dark matter. It's something they cannot see, they can't touch, they can't feel, they can't smell, they can't hear. So it's the same thing with God. No, no, it's not. It's not the same thing as God. Now, I'm not a like a physicist or a cosmologist or anything, but as far as I understand, the idea behind dark matter is that there is, when we are collecting data on gravitational pull, gravitational amount, the total amount of gravity in a patch of, let's say, another solar system, for example, based on the mass of the things we can calculate, there is too much gravity. So right now, I would say dark matter is almost like a, it's not, I don't think that they're saying it's a thing. It's more they're saying this is like a placeholder at this moment. There must be something that is causing this. They're not saying that it necessarily, like, they're not saying, oh, it's God and he just does whatever he wants. It's more like, okay, so we have 1 plus X equals this amount uh, of gravity. We should do more research into X. We should do more research into dark matter and how this works. Now I'm sure there's way more in depth here, but show me anything where we can do that with God. Anything. So it's we have a situation where, okay, the universe appears to, you know, our iteration of the universe appears to have a beginning. Something must have begun this, right? The X. And that's where it kind of stops. But Alida was saying, no, the X must be God. It must be Allah. It must be him, specifically. And that's the part where we're having trouble as atheists, at least for me. You know, it's not that I can't see or touch or hear or smell God. It's that I don't understand why you have decided X must be God. And this specific God, I don't understand how you got to that point. Because we're both at that point, right? We both recognize, okay, there was, you know, it appears that there's a start to the universe, at least our iteration of the universe. We both agree. There must have been something to set that in motion. We both agree. And I'm saying it's X, and you're saying it must be Allah. And I'm asking you, how do you know it must be Allah? Well, because there must be something that started it. Right, we agree. But how did you determine it must be Allah? Well, because it has to be self-sufficient. That's fine. Why is it Allah? Why is it a being at all? How did you come to that conclusion? So I feel like that hasn't been answered so far. Let's see if he does answer it. Yeah, I don't like this title as well. I think that is clickbait. Because he's gonna keep talking for more than 1 minute for multiple times, right? But yeah. So fine, you can say, well, I don't think it's a contradiction. Again, I think that dark matter is more of a placeholder. But even if it's not, you don't have to believe in dark matter. No scientist is saying you're gonna go burn in hell and that we're gonna make a bunch of laws to control countries based on our interpretation of dark matter. Nobody says that. So I don't think these are comparable ideas either. Like, hey, we're not sure how this one thing is happening. We'll say it's dark matter, and you're saying you have to follow this thing because I believe it's true, and also I'm going to make everybody else believe it's true. I just, like, I haven't seen any scientists, you know, dark matterists asking questions to dark matterists. You know, this isn't the same argument. You know what I mean? So again, this is a straw man argument. Yeah, and this isn't double standards. So this is a straw man type of argument. I'm using my logical reasoning, my rationality to come to simple conclusions. Well, that would be the problem, is that these are not simple answers, and the conclusion is overly simple. To determine it must be this specific being, you still haven't told us why it has to be a being, an intellectual being. You've just decided it, right? So these are simple conclusions and they shouldn't be. I think that's the problem. It's sort of like if we look outside, yeah, the world appears flat, but then the more that we study it, the more that we analyze it, the more experience that we gather, then we can start to realize, well, wait a minute, it's not flat. So if I want to just use his reasoning, we can just decide the world is flat, and that doesn't really work, right? We can't just have simple answers because they fit nicely into what to our questions, right? I mean, that's great. I know that you don't care how many scientists there are. So there's scientists that believe in God. That's fine. I don't know if Einstein was deist, but that doesn't mean that Einstein proved God. It just means that he had that belief. I mean, I'm not a scientist, right? But I'm a teacher, or I'm studying psychology, or there's certain things that I do that I also drink coffee. Does that mean that all teachers drink coffee, or that I've proven the benefits of coffee, or that because I like coffee, then it means that it is something that psychologists should recommend to patients? No, it just means it's something I'm also doing, right? So you can be a scientist and also have other stuff, right? These scientists also believed in God. That's fine. I'm sure there's scientists that also believe in alien visitation and also believe in ghosts. That doesn't mean that they're endorsing it as a scientist through their research and experimentation. So totally just a really bad argument. I really recommend, if you're Muslim or any other religion, watching this, please don't use that one. That one just doesn't work, you know. So he believed in a higher power, so what? So science or scientists and God is not contradictory. You can have scientists who are Muslim, Christian. So yeah, it's not a discovery, which is fine, but that wasn't the question, right? What was the question again? So he's being asked, so you figured out how the universe was created. Not even the most brilliant minds of our time can figure it out, but you figured it out. And then he's ending with, yeah, well, sometimes scientists, can be religious too. That's not answering the question, right? Are you brave enough to talk with famous atheists? This is not toughest atheism questions. This is a weird challenge. I don't know why this is a challenge. This seems very like it's like a really loaded way to ask that question, right? Are you brave enough? What would you do if you encountered them? I have no problem, because to be honest, what atheist you are, I don't care. The same thing applies. Bring your arguments, you have to answer them. I don't care, because what I'm on, I know I'm 100% so sure, logically, rationally, that there is no way you can get out of it except that you have to accept being a deist minimum. So again, that is my question, I suppose, to Ali Dawah, or people who believe similarly to him. Then, why is the first cause Allah as a being? Why can't it be a pair of creators that, when you put them together, they can make a creation, but otherwise they are independent, they are self-sufficient, they do their own thing. Maybe one of them creates you know atoms, and the other one creates energy, and then when you put them together, so maybe they both contribute in some way. I don't see how this is, you know what I mean? Don't see how we're getting to deism with just because I said so. Maybe theist, we can work on deism. I don't care. And I agree, you shouldn't care. There shouldn't be any challenge here, or you're not brave enough. If there is infinite time, why not infinite possibilities? Good question. I have to drink my water to answer this. Cool. This glass is empty. Okay. If we said infinite time, because the argument here is if you give an infinite amount of time, anything can happen. Is that the argument? Okay. Well, that's not my argument. So, all right. This is a fallacy because to make the properties for, I've heard this one mostly from Muslims. Yeah. So It's this idea that the properties only come from this thing. And I will say this is very telling that the only time I've ever heard this argument is when Muslim people are trying to quote unquote address atheist arguments. I've never heard it from Christians. I've never heard it from atheists. I've only heard it from Muslims when they're trying to present an argument against something they claim an atheist has said. That is the only time I've ever heard this argument, ever. So that is pretty telling, I think. I don't believe that this is something atheists have ever said or what, because what he's going to say is basically it doesn't matter how much time we give this empty glass, there's not going to be any Turkish dessert. That's the example he's giving. It's never going to show up. So this is a really, it's an argument that they're trying to make against evolution. This idea that if we start with a set of DNA, how do we end up with something else after many, 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 many years if it wasn't part of the original? So for example, how do we start off with something that has no fingers, and then after many, many years, there's one finger in the, millions of years later offspring, there's a finger, right? So the problem with this is that the glass is unchanging. With reproduction, that is not unchanging. You're not making static copies of yourself. You are combining different DNA. The DNA can mutate, it can duplicate. For example, we have lost our ability to manufacture our own vitamin C. If we go back in time genetically, we're able to find out when that happened and why it didn't damage our ancestors. This was at a time period when there was a much larger tropical region. There's a lot of fruit to eat, and you're getting plenty of vitamin C from the fruit that you eat. So when this got deleted or became inactive, I should say, and I'm not a biologist, so I'm sorry if I'm not using the right terms, but when this had happened, this did not damage the offspring because they were able to get that vitamin C through what they have consumed, right? So this is, again, I've never heard an atheist make this argument. I think this is an argument against evolution, I would say, more than it is an argument against atheism. And again, I only ever heard this from Muslims. So infinite time, will I ever get it? No. So as he says, time is irrelevant. Okay. Infinite time, will we get the universe? No, because the properties that make a universe, or the Ferrari, this is more important. It's not in there. Yeah, but they're interacting, right? Like how we can start off with hydrogen and end up with oxygen because of these atoms interacting, smashing into each other, developing new elements. We can create something new, right? If we have hydrogen and we have oxygen and they don't interact, cool, we have hydrogen and oxygen. But if they do interact, we get things like water and hydrogen peroxide, right? So we're creating something new. We're creating a new thing. And hydrogen peroxide versus liquid oxygen versus liquid hydrogen versus water, all of those have very different properties. You can use them in very different ways, and they have very different outcomes. Some of them are dangerous for you to ingest, some of them are necessary for you to ingest, right? So you can have these two things, hydrogen and oxygen, and if you don't let them interact, nothing happens. But they do interact, so other things happen. And I think that's the biggest problem with this example. The other example I heard was making a rainbow, like drawing a rainbow, but you only have the color black, or you only have a pencil, so you don't have any of the other colors. How can you accurately draw a rainbow that has, 6 or 7 colors, right? So again, that's the idea. Things have to interact. We can't just leave them as they are. So our questions are complete. That's why we will not accept Islam after I answer all of them. Okay, so notice though, they said all of us here are Muslim, right? I wonder where these questions came from, because they're not atheists. They're kind of, yeah. It reminds me of gosh, I forget his name, but he's one of the Christian apologists, and he goes around pretending to be an atheist sometimes, um, to make arguments against atheism. It's just it doesn't present it very well. Just ask questions of an atheist, guys. The last one that I wanted to talk about was whatever this was, because this popped up. It's with Zakir Naik. Now, I do have trouble with Zakir Naik because his answer, and I'm always recommended him, always, when I have questions about the Quran, for example, I've always recommended him. So it's it's something where it was about the mountains as pegs to hold the earth. And his argument was that if mountains didn't exist, then with every human step, the earth would be wibbly wobbly. That, ooh, wow. Citation needed, you know. I also really, he does these, um, I guess, to an extent, these thumbnails are also very, misleading a bit because it wasn't 60 seconds, right? First of all, the whole video was 12 minutes long, but it wasn't a 60-second thing. They gave him more time to answer if he wanted more time. So I don't know if that's a 60 seconds per answer thing. But for Zakir Naik to tell me in the thumbnail that these are overwhelmingly intellectual answers to an atheist, if it's overwhelmingly intellectual, that should be evident by the answer. You don't have to tell me that these are overly intellectual, right? So, all right, let's see what we got. This is on Peace TV. Oh, there's no subtitles. I don't know if we'll be able to watch this. Don't know. Because again, when I've played things that include the music or the sound, those tend to get flagged pretty fast for copyright, unfortunately, which is too bad. I guess I'll watch this on my own, and then we'll talk about any that are interesting. So yeah, that's where we're gonna go from here. With that being said, I want to thank you for joining me today. I hope this has been worth your time, especially if you are a Muslim person who wants to understand why, even after listening to all of the arguments for Islam and reading the Quran itself, that we still don't accept Islam as the answer to one of life's biggest questions. If you do have any answers to the questions I have posed in this video, please feel free to post it in the comment section below. That's how we can have more productive discussion and hopefully learn something from each other. If you guys want to check out the pinned comment below, you're going to find different ways to contact me, such as Twitter, Instagram, and also joining our Discord, as well as joining me on Patreon, where we do a monthly live stream. We have some different videos, posts, and pictures that are only for patrons. And if you'd rather just give me a one-time donation, then there's a link there for the Buy Me a Coffee app. But of course, that's just the lemon icing on the lemon cake. You guys are here and commenting, and that is definitely enough for me. I really appreciate all that you guys do. If you are interested in the article that Ali Dawah had referenced, I will be adding that to the end here. So if you're interested in science-y, journal-y stuff, then yeah, let's hang out together. Otherwise, as always, thanks for listening. So upon trying to find the information, it appears that it's actually in a book, not a scientific article. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in a different video later on. And once that's made, I can add that to the details section below. I did also want to add something real quick. So for my own traditional cultural creation story, we don't actually have gods. They're just like the firsts. I don't know how else to really describe them. And they actually created together. So they had abilities of their own, but only together could they create. So for example, one of them became the sun, but the other one lit the sun. One of them became the land, but the other one became the grass and things that grow out of the land. So that would be, I guess, an example of a two-person creator as opposed to a singular creator. So if that makes some sense, then that's kind of the idea that I was thinking. Anyway, guys, again, thanks for joining me, and sorry we couldn't get to the article. I just could not find the specifics about it other than in this book. So we'll get a hold of the book and give it a read. All right, guys, thanks again. Bye.